Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our final lecture on photosynthesis. But this is the one that has a lot of details to it, and you're probably going to need to go back and look at it a few times to make sure you understand it. There are also other videos out there. A crash course photosynthesis is pretty interesting. Khan Academy has one too. Read the book, comprehend it, understand photosynthesis. I can't say it enough. So our goal is to identify the reactants, products, and basic functions of photosynthesis. And you can read the far side. It's quite cute. All right, let's move on here. Objectives are describe what happens through the light-dependent reactions, describe what happens through the light-independent reactions, identify factors that affect the rate at which photosynthesis occurs. All right, keep those in mind then. So we're breaking it down, little pieces here. So think about it. Why do chloroplasts contain so many of these little membranes of the thylakoids right here? When most pigments absorb light, like the desk I'm touching right now, they eventually lose most of the energy as heat. Yeah, make sure my Pandora wasn't on. Sorry. But chloroplasts, lucky for us, avoid such losses. And the membranes are the key. These membranes in the thylakoids and the chloroplast itself are key to capturing light energy in the form of those high energy electrons. So the first one is describe what happens during the light-dependent reactions. All right, okay. The light-dependent reactions is exactly what it means. They encompass the steps of photosynthesis that directly involve the sunlight. We need sunlight for this. The light-dependent reactions occur, this is where it happens, in the thylakoids of the chloroplast. The thylakoids contain clusters of chlorophyll and proteins, proteins known as photosystems. All right? The photosystems absorb the sunlight and high energy electrons that are then passed to a series of electron carriers that are embedded in the thylakoid membrane. This is the membrane of the thylakoid right here. There is a photosystem 1 and a photosystem 2. 2 actually occurs before photosystem 1 because photosystem 1 was named first. It was discovered first. But don't worry about that. Just remember that photosystem 2 comes first. All right. So light energy is absorbed by electrons in the pigments. Here comes the light energy within photosystem 2, increasing the electron's energy level. The high energy electrons are passed through electron transport chain, which is a series of electron carriers that shuttle high energy electrons during ATP generating reactions. The thylakoid membrane, again, provides new electrons to chlorophyll from water molecules. All right? Water molecules are inside the thylakoid space. The light breaks up these things, and we have our electrons being taken here, all right? And then you end up with hydrogen ions and wonderful oxygens. So the electrons replace the high energy electrons. It's a cycle that had been lost to the electron transport chain before. Oxygen is then released into the air. And this reaction is actually the source of nearly all the oxygen in the Earth's atmospheres. And these hydrogen ions, as you see dotted around here, are released inside the thylakoid. Keep that in mind. That's important later on. All right? Let's move on then. So energy from the electrons, I already said that part. Energy from the electrons is used by proteins in the electron transport. There's a protein right here, to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma inside the chloroplast into the thylakoid space inside the thylakoids. This, obviously, the pumping action is active transport because the hydrogen ions, these guys are being pumped against the gradient. There's more in here than out there, so they're going to pump against that. So keep this in mind. This has, again, happening for a reason. So at the end of the electron transport chain of the photosystem 2, the electrons are then passed on to photosystem 1. All right? Because some energy has been used to pump these hydrogen ions into the thylakoid membrane, electrons are now weakened they do not contain as much energy as they used to when they reach photosystem 1. Pigments in the photosystem 1, again, use light energy to re-energize these electrons, get them all charged up again. So at the end of photosystem 1, at the short photosystem 1, NADP plus molecules in the stroma pick up the high energy electrons and H plus ions in the outer surface of the thylakoid membrane to then make us NADPH. The ions accumulated within the thylakoid space from the splitting of the water and from being pumped from the stroma, pumped in here and the splitting of the water there, the buildup of the ions makes the stroma over here negatively charged relative to the space within the thylakoid. This gradient difference in both charge and hydrogen ion concentration across this membrane provides the energy to make the ATP. So, hydrogen ions cannot directly cross the thylakoid membrane on their own. However, the thylakoid membrane contains a protein called ATP synthase. It's a protein, all right? This spans the membrane, goes across the membrane, and allows these hydrogen ions down here to pass through it. So, powered by the gradient hydrogen ions here, they pass through the ATP synthase and force it to rotate. And as it rotates, the ATP synthase binds, takes some ADP and a phosphate group together to produce the ATP. This process is called chemiosmosis, all right? Because it's using hydrogens, not water, but it's still osmosis. It enables a light-dependent electron transport to produce not only NADPH, but also ATP at the end of the electron transport chain. Wow, right? Well, we need to really study this process to understand it well. So the light-dependent reactions produce oxygen gas and convert ADP and NADPH into energy carriers called ATP and NADPH. The ATP and the NADPH then provide the energy needed to build the high energy sugars, remember, from low energy carbon dioxide. Remember, plants still use carbon dioxide and they make carbohydrates of ours too. So that was our objective, describe what happens during the light-dependent reactions, and we just said that. Moving on then, if you're ready, go back and look at light-dependent reactions if you're not. But let's talk about what happens in the next part of photosynthesis. Objective 2 is describe what happens during the light-independent reactions. So during the light-independent reactions, this is commonly known as the Calvin cycle. It's a cycle, so it's no beginning, no ending. Plants use the energy the ATP, right here, and NADPH contains that they got from the light-dependent reactions to build stable, high-energy carbohydrate compounds that can obviously be stored for a long time, and that when we eat, we get energy from too. Well, how does this happen? Well, remember, plants do use this CO2. And here in this case, we're using 6 CO2 to make things a little simpler, to make the math work. All right. Carbon dioxide molecules enter the Calvin cycle from the atmosphere. An enzyme in the stroma of the chloroplast combines carbon dioxide molecules with, there's an enzyme right here, with the 5 carbon compounds that are already present in the organelle. And they're present there because they were already made previously. It's a cycle. They producing at the end 3 carbon compounds, these 3 carbon compounds that continue into the cycle. Now if you multiply all this by 6, you're going to see it's going to be 12 3 carbon compounds. So for every 6 carbon dioxide molecules that enter the cycle, a total of 12 carbon compounds are produced. Other enzymes in the chloroplast, and here, chloroplast in this area, all right, convert the 3 carbon compounds into higher, so there's reactions happening right here, higher energy forms in the rest of the cycle And they're using some of the ATP and high energy electrons from the NADPH to make this happen. All right, here we go. ATP is being used, converting those 12 3-carbon compounds. NADPH is also being used right there too. So about mid-cycle, 2 of the 12 3-carbon compounds, 2 of them, are removed from the cycle. These molecules become the building blocks that the plant cell uses to produce the sugars, the lipids, amino acids, and other compounds too. So these become useful for the plants right there. The remaining, then now we have is 10 3-carbon compounds left, molecules left, are then converted using ATP, okay, back into the 6 5-carbon molecules that combine again with the 6 new carbon dioxide molecules again to begin the cycle all over again. So the Calvin cycle uses 6 molecules of carbon dioxide to produce a single 6-carbon sugar molecule. Da, da, da. The energy for the reactants is supplied by compounds produced in the light-dependent reactions as ATP and NADPH. The plant uses the sugar produced by the Calvin cycle to meet its energy needs and to build macromolecule needed for growth and development. When other organisms eat the plants, they can use the energy and raw materials stored in these compounds. Yum! Makes you want to become a vegetarian, right? So healthy for you. Good stuff, man. Plants get it right. The end result of the 2 sets of photosynthetic reactions, they work together, light-dependent, light-independent, to produce those high-energy sugars in from carbon dioxide coming in, and water going in. These are reactants. And our products are oxygen and high-energy sugars. We get food and oxygen. Yay for plants. So objective 2, describe what happens during the light-independent reactions. So during the light-independent reactions, again, ATP and NADPH from the light-dependent reactions are used to produce those high-energy sugars. Good stuff. All right, objective 3 was to identify the factors that affect the rate at which photosynthesis occurs. If you look out in the environment and nature around you, you could probably figure this out, but I'm going to tell you anyhow. All right, so the reactions of photosynthesis are made possible by enzymes that function, as we talked about, those enzymes, best between 0 degrees Celsius and 35 degrees. So temperature, either above or below this range as a range of tolerance, may affect those enzymes. And if that happens, then the slowing down the rate of the photosynthesis, it can slow it down or nearly stop it. The high light intensity increases. High light intensity can increase the rate of photosynthesis. But after the light intensity reaches a certain level, however, the plant reaches its maximum rate of photosynthesis as seen in this graph right here, and it will not continue to increase up like this. So these are our sun plants in the red, and these are shade plants in the green. They take in a little bit more here, but then the sun plants will continue to go on a little bit above it, and then they'll level off over time. And as remember, water is one of the raw materials in photosynthesis, so a shortage of water can slow down or even stop photosynthesis. Water loss can also damage plant tissues. Plants that live in dry conditions often have like waxy coatings, right? This kind of plant right here, maybe you've seen them, on their leaves to reduce the water loss. They may also have biochemical adaptations that make photosynthesis more efficient under some dry conditions, which we're going to talk about. There's 2 different types here too. So we need temperature, sunlight, and water all affect photosynthesis. And now we know why or how. All right, so photosynthesis under extreme conditions. So sometimes there's very dry environments. So in order to conserve water, most plants under bright, hot conditions close or small openings in their leaves that normally bring in the carbon dioxide. So here's right here, they're called guard cells, and they can close and open these things to let gases exchange. And here CO2 can go in, and they can close, and O2 out, or they can open. They can do whatever they need to with them. This causes the carbon dioxide within leaves to fall to very low levels and are slowing down or even stopping photosynthesis. The 2 plants that we're going to talk about next are called C4 and CAM plants, CAM plants, have biochemical adaptations that minimize the water loss while still allowing photosynthesis to take place even in intense sunlight. So let's look at the C4 plants. These plants have specialized chemical pathways that allow them to capture even the very low levels of carbon dioxide and then be able to pass it into the Calvin cycle. The name C4 comes from the fact that the first compound formed in this pathway contains 4 carbon atoms, not 3. The C4 pathway requires a little extra energy in the form of ATP to function, though. C4 organisms include crop plants like corn, sugarcane, and sorghum. That's what you need to know about C4 plants for this class. There's, of course, a lot more details. These plants, the members of the Crassulaceae family, family, such as cacti and other succulents is what they're called, incorporate carbon dioxide into organic acids during photosynthesis. This process is called Crassulacean acid metabolism, or CAM, or CAM plants. CAM plants, emit air into the leaves only at night, where carbon dioxide is combined with existing molecules to produce organic acids, trapping the carbon within the leaves. And then during the daytime, when the leaves are tightly sealed to prevent water loss, these compounds, again, release the carbon dioxide, enabling carbohydrate production. CAM plants include like pineapples and many desert cacti and ice plants too. So objective 3 was to identify the factors that affect the rate at which photosynthesis occurs. So among the most important factors are obviously temperature, light intensity, and the availability of water. Finally, our objectives to describe what happens during the light-dependent reactions, go back and review. What happens during the light-independent reactions, go back and review. And identify the factors that affect the rate at which photosynthesis occurs. And this one I'm not even going to look at because it hurts my eyes. It's moving, isn't it? Ugh.